The Dragon Lord's Consort Chapter 7. The Struggle of the Consort. The dry heat from Outlands hit him before he saw it, but it was still a nice feeling. Not like the nice feeling of embers kindled, but the feeling of heat that was in the air that automatically made it feel like he was warming up from everywhere. Though the smell was something else. He knew it smelled like sulfur, dried earth, hot air, and musk of a dragon. He didn't really pay much attention to it, or rather, he left it in the back of his mind, but the feeling was so odd, but not bad. Was it instinctual, or something that came to him now that he was so used to being around dragons? What did come next was something he always found terrifying, and despite being here a lot of times now, he still wasn't fully sure how to proceed, and that was the huge, gigantic dragons that surrounded the area. Yes, the teen dragons all scattered here are there, but the majority of them were in their own areas and whatnot. The adults, however, roamed the skies, being larger than most clouds. Those that didn't fly were taking huge chunks of land with their giant bodies. Being home, the three dragons seemed almost at ease here with their arrival, and Spike felt that Ember loosened a bit. It showed too much for when her guards broke off formation to fly off and do their own things. Ember didn't bother to comment or yell for Garble to stick around for his punishment. Instead, she made her way to a large part of the mountain where he assumed she was living in. It was a large mountain, probably for some drake that was very huge. He mentally slapped himself as he realized that Ember's father was former Dragon Lord, so it would make sense that he would live inside of a large mountain. However, it would make much more sense that eventually she might grow into a larger dragon herself and need the space for the next millennium or so. How long did Dragon Lords reign? He would have to ask that when given the chance. Ember flew eagerly towards her home, making her way to an opening on the side, large enough for most dragons to fit through, leaving a large gap to fly in which plenty of room space was there. There were some turns here and there, having Ember bank left and right. Spike held onto her with her might, but he knew he was safe with her. He felt like he was completely safe with her. The tunnel ended with Spike and Ember entering a giant chamber in the center of the mountain. In awe, he saw that it was almost hollow. They landed right after the entrance, where Spike slowly got off Ember's back and took in his surroundings. The chamber, however, was decorated to suit the needs of your daily dragon. However, off to the side of the chamber was a large mountain of pony-made pillows. How they were acquired by Dragon Claws, he would ask that later. In the center, there was a large lava pool where a few dragons could lay or safely bathe in. What made it interesting was that it seemed to pull in lava, but a small river led any excess off the mountain. Not far from it was a small water fountain. Again, how it got there was just added to the pile of questions in which I had to ask. Lastly, there was a separate room where Spike saw a horde, assumingly it belonged to Ember. It was a large horde too, so maybe it came with being a Dragon Lord? His gaze turned to Ember, who seemed eager to hear his response of her home, or in this case, their home. What was not this morning that he was sleeping at home where he had luxuries that most ponies took for granted, what most ponies didn't realize were grand luxuries and what was something not really required on a daily basis. He wanted to actually say that what he had here didn't really lack much other than his usual stuff. His books in which to read, including his comics and his necessities for a daily routine in life. Toothbrushes, claw filters, a warm hot shower facility, regular facilities, and more. Yet he knew that his choice would lead to a different life, a different future, but he knew as that of now, he would carry on this choice with the person he cared for. "It looks amazing here, Ember." His response was genuine, and Ember let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She gave a pleased smile and felt satisfied with his response. "It's not home, but maybe you can help me make it home." With a satisfied nod, Ember embraced him, hugging the little drake tightly. "I will try my best for you. I truly will, and I hope that maybe in the future you can accept it as a home." She thought of his family and quickly issued in. "Maybe this could be a second home." Spike hugged back and once more felt a warmth wash over him unlike any other hug before. It was as if her heart, her care, her very soul was being poured onto him. So wonderful, so full of care that it was just magical. The power is transferring, he's accepting it. Maybe it will be enough for me, she thought. I just hope that he will accept me after the truth is revealed. When they separated, something sparked inside of Spike, making him growl a bit. It wasn't particularly loud of a growl, but it was more of an internal one, something both parties pulled back from one another. To Spike, it felt like a burp he held within himself, but to Ember, it was a sign of a change within Spike, something that she may have caused. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know what that was." He seemed confused and a bit embarrassed, but nothing that spoke alarm. Ember, however, saw a difference. A change in him that she wasn't really sure how much of it really showed, but it was so subtle that if no Drake had really paid much attention to him before, they would pass him off as just as before. Ember, however, kept every little detail about him to mind and heart. She would need to keep everything about him in mind in order for him to be more comfortable here. The change was minor, small to a point, but she witnessed it happen in front of her. Her slits had shrunken a bit thinner than before, making him more draconic. His voice carried a bit of more maturity, slowly altering it a bit, but not so much that he may have not have noticed. The scales that have encompassed his body had taken on a slightly sharper tone. The last change that Ember had noticed was that a small musk had begun to aura around him. Before, his musk was near unnoticeable, mostly because he was still an infant, and had been mostly surrounded by ponies, so other marks were all over him. Yet, it was here as he emitted his own brand of musk that was so gentle compared to the other males that she was surrounded with. Males emitted a musk that told other potential mates of a dragon of their maturity, if they were mated or have mated, their ages, and so on. Babies have their own, but it's too small, or they still carry their parents' musk since they recovered from the hatchings. So, due to Spike's unbringing, his scent was more or less covered by the ponies he was surrounded by, and it wasn't a terrible smell, but it really wasn't something that she really understood. It was so foreign, queer to a point that it made him that much more interesting, but now it made him that much more. Ember? His voice broke through the spaced out look. She blinked and shook her head. Sorry, just letting my mind wander a bit. Were you going to ask something? Where am I supposed to stay at? He looked around, trying to find a room of some sort. I'm not sure if there's another room or something you want me to stay in. Ember cocked her head, confused by his question before it dawned on her that again, at the castle, he had his own sleeping area, probably never really sleeping with others in the same spot, let alone bed. Twilight did mention how he used to sleep with her when he was younger, but grew out of it, and that made sense. The same went with most hatchlings at a growing age. She tried to word this as best as possible without coming off strong. You sleep where I sleep, Spike. It's customary for consorts or mates to sleep in the same area. Spike's face went a bit red at that, and he felt flushed. You mean I sleep with you? He asked, somewhat flustered. Ember wilted a bit at his tone, and it showed. Spike immediately felt bad for what he had said, and quickly assured her. Sorry, Ember, I wasn't so sure. I mean, how are we supposed to be, you know? Again, she realized how the situation to him was alien to him, but she quickly lifted her spirits a bit and nodded. I know, Spike. It will be some time before you're used to it. Being my consort has many roles to play, and the importance of them later on. Does that include the trials I'm supposed to do? He asked. Ember hesitated in her response. In some way, he didn't have to prove much to her father or other dragons, but he did have to show to the others why he may have the privilege of being with Ember. A consort, a mate, or in other latter cases, a concubine, but she didn't dare even think of Spike like that. He was so much more than that, and it was something that she wouldn't ever consider for other dragons for. In the end, it was her decision whether to take on more mates or not. What you will do in the trials will more or less be decided on how others treat you or see you. Regardless of the outcome, my decision will be the final outcome, and it will remain the same. You are my consort, and you will be with me by my side. Spike felt a bit relieved at that, and more eased knowing that Ember was the deciding factor of these trials. The light he had always surrounded her seemed to glow a bit brighter every time he heard how much he meant to her. But what exactly do I have to prove here? Strength, speed, some oddly dragon thing that I don't know about? Ember gave a shrug, which he wilted a bit at that. The trials are different in each way, yes. Maybe speed or strength, that will come into factor, but if they see what kind of dragon you are, it will most likely be intellectual or worthiness of being my consort. He felt a bit more better on that. Being raised by one of the smartest ponies alive in all of Equestria, he had years of knowledge behind him, with Twilight helping him becoming incredibly smart for his age. He surpassed most of the students at the schools, intellectual-wise, and with all the help of his friends throughout the years, he had gained more knowledge from so many different sources that he felt more confident than ever about these trials, at least the ones where he felt like he had a chance. Then a thought came to him. Hey, Ember, if I somehow end up passing these trials, even though you say that I don't need to prove nothing to no Drake. Would that make me like a prince or something? Or prince lord? Sorry, I don't really know how the monarchy here works. Ember shook her head. No, well, not in the sense that your pony friends do it. She then motioned for him to follow. Come, I know where we can obtain some more knowledge, and it might help you with your future here. His future here. Was that a comforting thought or a fearful one? His friends were not here for him to help him in case he got in trouble, but he did have Ember. He had saved the Crystal Empire and helped out in saving Equestria, but he had the help of his friends, which were no longer here. But he had Ember. He is given a chance to prove that a dragon raised by ponies can be smart and stronger than any dragon and do so without his friends, with Ember by his side. Yet he believed that with Ember by his side, he would do fine here. Approaching the small cave where the hoard had piled, he saw that not only did it contain jewels and gems, but it had a large shelf on the wall where hundreds of scrolls lay. Some of them looked new, while others looked like they have been there since the ancient times. Huh? Was all he said. Ember, who had let him in, gave him a raised eyebrow. What? She inquired. Spike looked at her, and then he felt ashamed on what he was thinking. All dragons were dumb, and they didn't like books or knowledge, and yet here was a room where ancient text of dragon lore and history lied before him. He knew that they learned how to read, speak, or just in general learn proper pronunciation, and here was proof of that. Shaking his head, he responded, Sorry, I didn't think that dragons would have scrolls or any knowledge based in scrolls. I thought that dragons were, not into books and, stuff like that. He spoke a bit sheepishly. Ember nodded in understanding. Yes, I am aware of the lack of intelligence between most of the species, but when you consider that in order for a dragon or a dragon lord to learn any general understanding of a language, you must read. She approached the wall, slowly running her claws over a few scrolls. Many dragons are not aware that there are scrolls in here and have taught countless generations how to read, write, and more. Some of these predate pony history by thousands of years. Many care not for them, or most don't know how they exist, or that they do exist at all. Spike stared a bit in awe as these scrolls in here are older than possibly Celestia, possibly before even Discord or even time of the Great Faust. Approaching the wall of scrolls, cast a gaze over them before humor ran through him, a giggle escaping him, and Ember turned to him. Something amusing? She inquired. He nodded. I'm pretty sure if Twilight were here, she would be squealing with delight at knowing that these are scrolls that even predate any pony culture. She would probably be in here until every last scroll was read a dozen times over. She would flip through it knowing that I'm the one that gets to read them and not her. Many, many miles away, through the vast lands that expanded between the purple alicorn's ears, twitched an upsetting thought entered her. I don't know why, but I'm mad that someone is learning something that I would love to learn. At Spike's eyes scanning and studying the scrolls before him, he noticed that some of the scrolls, at least the ones covered in the layer of dust or ashes, were either in reddish colors that seemed to resemble fire in its brighter forms, or in sapphire colors that blended in different shades. However, it's the ones that seem new or used more often but with care. Curious, he returned to Ember. Hey, Ember, is there a reason why some of these scrolls are color-coded? I noticed the ones that are used are sapphire colors, while these ones over here are old and don't look like they've been touched. Ember nodded in question. The sapphire ones that are newly created or recently added information and added to the collection from discoveries from either recent dragon lords or elders. Elders? He asked. Ember paused, thinking a bit on how to word her response before slowly explaining to him. You can consider elders as dragons whom have lived many millenniums, kind of like your princess's advisors, or however it is through them that we learn our history. They have no control like the dragon lords do, but they are the wisest dragons alive. Millenniums? He asked, a bit astounded. How old are these elders? Ember gave a sheepish shrug. Some are only 1,000 years, while others are thousands of years. Some predate Equestria by long periods. She began to pull out a few of the old ones that were layered in dust. 5 old scrolls where one sapphire scroll left their shelves and were held in Ember's arms. These ones are the ones that might help you understand our history a bit better than most. I hope you don't mind reading these to help you. Spike snorted, waving it off. Please. I live with a mare who's living in a library, who owns a library too. I help with practically reading the book she reads. He gently pulled the scroll from her arms and smiled at her. Scrolls are no biggie. He opened it, and his face dropped as he realized that this one and possibly a few other ones were written in a language he could barely understand in. The hieroglyphics that looked like ancient Amazonian. Unless I can't read them. Ember giggled at that, grabbing the scroll from him. Don't worry, I'll teach you how to read them. Some will come to you quickly, while others, well, they might take some time. Spirits lifted, he walked with her back out the little cave. I sure am thankful to have someone like you, Ember. Maybe the more I know about my kind, the better I'll be at these trials. Who knows? Maybe it won't be such a struggle to get the other dragons to accept me. A small smile formed on her muzzle. As I said, regardless of what others think, my choice on you remains forever the same. I know, and I'm grateful. I want to know all I can about dragons, so when I return home to Equestria, we won't have any problems or struggles between dragons and ponies. I can't wait. His excitement was infectious, but her smile only remained because she didn't want her true feelings to show. Once the trials are over within the week and the truth is revealed, he might hate her for knowing that he may never leave here. The bonding process is already starting to take place, and it must hold within the week's time. If not, the spell could be disaster for them both, especially if he leaves before the week's end. Her struggles have manifested beyond her control, and, well, it'll really only get harder from here.